So today we're talking with Dr. Steven Sanders, who is a professor at Oregon State University, and he will be discussing his research interest in general, and some specific project that he's working on. So thank you for your time, Dr. Sanders, and I will, give you some space for you to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your research interest in general.
Okay. As has already been mentioned, I'm Steven Sanders. I am a professor of clinical psychology at Oregon State University. I've been here for 2 years, and I really enjoy it. I love the faculty lifestyle, the flexibility, and the option to teach and mentor students. Primarily, my research has three main focuses. I look at adjustment, identity, and racism and the impacts of racism. So it's really interesting. I get to meet a lot of cool people. And I think I have a very cool project to talk to you all about today.
Thank you. And can you please describe a project that, in which you are working currently?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to talk about the project a little bit and then how I got interested in it. My lab, like most of the department here, has mostly students who identify as female. And they were joking and laughing before a lab meeting one day about men being toxic. And so once the lab started, I said, okay, what is toxic masculinity? What does it mean? And none of them had a very good answer. And so I said, okay, fine. Since you don't have a definition and you know the rules are we don't use words we can't define and quantify, let's figure out what toxic masculinity is. And so we started this project in November of 2022, and it's been ongoing. And so it's a mixed methods approach. So we've been doing some qualitative work and some quantitative work. And so today, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about that qualitative piece that we've been working on.
Thank you. Oh, that's interesting. So how do you decide that it should be a mixed method and then, the importance of the qualitative side?
Yeah, and so I really, as I used to be a huge fan of quantitative, and I didn't think qualitative was important. But in these conversations with students, and we looked at the literature, and there wasn't any real literature telling what toxic masculinity was from a data-driven standpoint. And so if we don't know what we're measuring, if we don't have any sort of consensus of what knowledge is or how we define something, we can't measure it. And so to be irresponsible as researchers to jump in with a quantitative approach. And so I wrote an IRB application to use qualitative methods, specifically 6 open-ended interview questions to come up with a definition of toxic masculinity based on that data using a grounded theory approach. So it was a lot of work. And I guess we can talk a little bit about how much work it was. But before we as quantitative researchers can measure something, we have to actually have some sort of shared definition. And those definitions can only be generated by qualitative approaches.
Nice. Well, thank you. So how do you formulate your question for the qualitative side?
Yeah, and so I think when we get ready to design research questions, there's certain criteria we want to be able to check off. Is it feasible? Is it interesting? And do we already know the answer? Well, it's interesting because we hear about toxic masculinity in pop culture all the time. There are psychologists who talk about it and try to measure it, but they use proxy instruments, so that's already an issue. And it is feasible. We know that we can do it. My lab can afford to pull it off, and it's not too heavy of a lift. And so the first thing we really wanted to figure out is what is the definition of toxic masculinity? Like, what is it? And so that was the overarching kind of question that we tried to answer. And so that is really just what we started with, because that was the argument. Like, oh, that person's toxic. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. So what is the definition of toxic masculinity?
So I understand that from what you are saying, that the the question came out of a real life experience, real life interaction with others, and
Yeah.
you know, a discussion of something that seemed to be trivial, but didn't have a formal definition.
Right. It definitely has a formal definition. And you're right. It did start as basically a trivial conversation with students laughing and joking amongst themselves. Like, oh, well, ha ha ha, that guy, didn't do whatever, therefore he's toxic. And then being the professor that I am, I think everything is a learning opportunity.
Mhm.
Okay, well, what does that mean? Like, give me an actual, like, how do you operationally define that? Is that something that you are willing to stand on and say that that's a real thing? And none of the students were. So that's when we knew, or
That's
that's when
interesting.
I knew, like, we have an opportunity here, um, to actually go in and talk about it. And I think that is really cool.
Great. So you said that you work with the students. How do you coordinate as a team with the students? What was the role of everyone?
Oh yeah, that was hard. Because I have undergraduate and graduate students. But for this particular project, it started out with just undergrads. And it was me teaching them a approach and then sending them out to try it, and then they would come back. Um, that was rough because it was essentially me doing everything twice. But that is rewarding for me as a professor. Like I enjoy that teaching portion. And so the students were kind of separated into different task groups. So there was one group who was tasked with going through all of the literature they could find about toxic masculinity and look at the instruments that were used, look at the definitions that were used, look at what the American Psychological Association said, look at all of the educational research. And so those three did a very intense literature search. And it took them about 2.5 months roughly to get through everything. Um, and then they presented their findings in a lab meeting, and we had a really good and about 2-hour conversation about what they found. The next two students had to take all of that information and propose a interview protocol. And I told them they needed to come up with at least 4 questions. Um, and they had to come up with at least 4 open-ended questions, which they successfully did. And we then we used a shortcut. We didn't actually do in-person interviews. We did a combination of SONA, which is, of course, like that participant pool for undergrad students in psychology, and we also recruited college students from, different states. And so there was a different set of students, the same, essentially, I took all 5 of those students together and they went through and did the analysis portion to come up with themes from those responses. And then I kind of helped them go from those themes to generating a definition of toxic masculinity based on the data. So it was a lot of moving pieces.
Yes, so that was interesting how you could, access data, access the participants, from different places. So, were there any research, ethics considerations that you had to account for, or plan for?
Well, yes. So anytime you are coming up with a definition for some sort of construct, there's going to be pushback. And anytime you are talking about masculinity, there's going to be a lot of pushback. And there was some internal concerns and external concerns for our project. And I don't know if what we did is I made the decision to start with white men, because to me that was easier. And so when we talk about masculinity in the context of the United States, it's mostly just, what does the majority do? And so that's looking at white men. And we wanted to start there because ultimately, after we did the definition, we wanted to actually design a quantitative instrument to measure the presence of toxic masculinity. And so that was something we had to have some very, intentional conversations about. because we had to make sure in everything that we wrote, everything we presented, we made it very clear that we weren't stopping with white men and we weren't saying initially that only white men can be toxic. We also received pushback saying that men and women display traits of both femininity and masculinity. Why are you not measuring this in women? And it was the exact same argument. We aren't doing that yet. And so we had to be very clear about the future of our work and who it applies to. So all of our qualitative responses, we thought ahead. We gathered data from men and women with no restrictions on race. For this first phase, we only analyzed the qualitative data from the 470 men and women who identified as white. So I
Mhm.
think that was the largest ethical concern we had.
Yes. Okay, and how do you analyze your data? What was the process of analyzing the data? Just in general, maybe for both uh, research approach, the qualitative side and the quantitative.
Okay, so the qualitative side was a lot of fun. We took those 400, I want to say it's 470. I think that was the right number of participants who identified as white. We took those responses, we put them into in vivo, and we just built themes from it. And so that was a lot of work. I broke the responses down. I think there were dyads of students. I think it was six total. So there were three dyads, and each of them got, I want to say 100 to look at together. Yeah, so it was 300. And then I had to do, I think, 160 or 170 by myself, which to me was fair because I've had more experience doing qualitative work. So I just assumed I would get through faster. That's actually not what happened. The students really took to the work and they moved very quickly. And so we took that approach, it was like, again, grounded theory, because we just assumed that the theory didn't exist correctly yet. And so we wanted the data to take us wherever it took us. And so that to me was pretty rewarding. The next step after we came up with the definition and those themes, we actually generated approximately 165, 170 items to measure those various domains of what we were proposing to call toxic masculinity. We then emailed those potential items to six experts in the field of men and masculinity.
Mhm.
We intentionally chose two experts who were very vocal in thinking that toxic masculinity is not a real thing. Two who were very vocal and said that it is real and almost all men display those traits. And two who were very neutral and they would say that, yes, we think it exists, but we don't think it's this pervasive thing that all men exhibit. And so we kind of worked together with those six folks and we essentially told them, hey, you need to go through and look at our definition and look at these items. And we want you to remove anything that either doesn't meet the definition, is not worded well, is a loaded question, is a double-barreled question, is some sort of reductive question, or I don't, whatever, go through and tell us you want to remove them. So from the 165, I actually pulled it up, 57 items were identified to be removed. I said, oh, okay, cool. But the other 108 were deemed as acceptable. So we took those 108 items and we actually administered those to 683 college age men who identified as white. Well, not college age, men who are actually enrolled in college.
Mhm.
We then used an exploratory factor analysis to go through and figure out which items fit and which items did not. Once we did that, it actually helped us reduce those items down to 35. So we went from 165 to 108 to 35. We then took those 35 items and administered them again to a new sample. So it was a totally different sample again
Mhm.
of white men in college. And then we used a confirmatory factor analysis to go through and check whether or not our structure was good, like our instrument was working. We waited 2 weeks and then we reopened the survey again for those exact same men from that phase of the instrument development process to retake it so we could establish whether this was a reliable instrument using test retest reliability. After that second administration, we did our confirmatory factor analysis. We saw that there were about, it was about 7 items that didn't do well. And so we
Mhm.
reduced it again down to 28. So now we have a 28 item instrument to measure toxic masculinity in white men in college. It's reliable. We think that it's valid. And so we also administered 2 proxies, the confirming to masculine role norms, and the masculine role norm inventory, I think are the 2 we used. And those have been used over the last 20 some odd years as proxies. So we hypothesized that our instrument should have a positive correlation with those instruments, which it did. And we also used the liberal feminist attitudes and ideology scale. And we hypothesized that there will be a negative correlation between those two, since they should represent 2 separate constructs.
Mhm.
So we did all of those wonderful things, all of that fun statistical approaches to establish the reliability and validity of that instrument. That's what we've done so far. So it was a lot. That's why it took so long to
Mhm.
get the qualitative and quantitative pieces, but we do think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, but I guess it took long because you went from zero to, building the instruments, identifying the topic, the need for an instrument, the appropriate instrument to measure what you wanted to measure, and also the specific question. Do you remember the questions that you asked in the qualitative interviews?
I can look them up. Let's see,
Mhm.
because we recently submitted the paper for peer review, and so it's still on my computer, so I
Oh,
should
good.
have it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So we had 6 open-ended questions. The first was, what is your definition of masculinity? Then we have, how would you define toxic masculinity? Then we ask, how can women display traits of toxic masculinity? In media, describe instances of toxic masculinity you've seen if they exist.
Mhm.
Give examples of toxic masculinity you've observed in person, if any. And then the final question is, how have you displayed traits of toxic masculinity, if ever? And so we tried to make these questions super broad,
Yes.
and we hoped it would make it very easy.
Mhm.
But, we ended up getting a lot of data we had to slog through, and it took a while.
Mhm. Yes. Wow. So how do you conduct the interviews? You said that it was remote?
Yeah, so I knew that we wouldn't have time to, let me back up. I knew everything we would do with this study would be heavily scrutinized from multiple angles. And I wanted to have I just wanted to oversample to make sure we would be insulated from undue criticism. Because anytime you write about toxic masculinity, it gets polarized and, politicized immediately. And I wanted to insulate my students from that as much as possible.
Mhm.
And so the way we did it is we had really 3 different recruitment methods. We did very few in-person interviews, specifically so I could teach my students how to do it. And so I think I did 3 where they watched remotely. I think I did about 5 or 6 with them in the room, and then I gave like each student 1 chance or 2 chances to conduct the interview themselves. But the bulk of the data were collected using Qualtrics. And so we didn't have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions on
Mhm.
those Qualtrics surveys. But I thought that was a good enough trade-off because these are open-ended questions. The students could write as much as they wanted to. We had a last question, was there anything else you wanted us to know or anything you think is important for us to hear about, which we don't really count, but we did use that to generate data. So it was interesting.
Mhm.
And again, we used Sona to generate participants from our campus. And then we used a platform called Prolific, which is like online recruitment, and it's samples nationwide and international.
Okay. Wow. It is. has taken some time, but I think it's been important to have a robust study and valid instruments and study that is trustworthy, that is credible. Um, so can you share with us some of the findings or preliminary findings that you have on either side?
Yeah. So for the qualitative piece, after going through and like analyzing the data, we were able to generate a definition of toxic masculinity based on the data. And the definition we have is toxic masculinity is the overemphasis and indulgence in societal-based masculine traits to an extent that is harmful to oneself and or others. And so it was really cool to be able to tell folks, oh, now we have a definition and it's based on, actual data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Once we did that, we also were able to, go through, generate those items, run those analyses. And once we did the exploratory and confirmatory factor analyses, we ended up having a four-factor structure for toxic masculinity. And let's see, I'm just scrolling through the paper to actually get the four factors, because of course we don't write our papers in a way that's easy enough to look at. Okay, so the four factors were masculine superiority, gender rigidity, emotional restriction, and repressed suffering. So we came up with a definition and we came up with an actual factor structure of what we're saying. If you display these traits, we are more confident in saying that you do have some level of toxic masculinity. It'll take additional research to come up with like cutoff scores to say this score in this domain represents this type of behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like the future areas of research we have.
Mm-hmm. So those four items are factors that
Yeah, those are the four
identify
factors.
toxic masculinity.
Yep.
So those were like four themes that emerged
Right.
from
So,
your
so when
data
we did the
analysis.
original research, we had more themes, but
Mm-hmm.
we used those themes to inform the items. And then once we did like the reduction in items based on our quantitative approaches, that's when we renamed the structures to actually to represent what they encompass.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's really cool. Hopefully, pretty well, the preprint paper is already online, so you can read all of this. I can send you the link for your students if you want.
Yes, yes, that will be awesome. To read the paper and how reading the final the product of all this process that you just described.
Yeah.
Nice. So I will look for that. I also wanted to know about any challenges that you faced throughout the process. You've been mentioning some of those, but specific challenges that kind of make you, don't know, reconsider, shift your plan or adjust, um, and also how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah. I think the primary challenge is just how much work it is.
Mm-hmm.
And these are undergrad students. And so they're not none of my graduate students were interested in doing this work. So they were working on other projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did not have like a buffer between me and the undergrad. So there wasn't a graduate student who could kind of massage things and make things easier for me. So that did get somewhat frustrating. And so in my lab, I use an umbrella supervision approach where I
Mm-hmm.
work direct with my grad students and usually indirect with my undergrads. And it wasn't an option for this particular project. And so that did get difficult. There were some moments when I said, okay, why am I even doing this? Is this worth all of this work I'm doing? But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't shift, obviously. I stayed with it. And we've actually added faculty collaborators in my
Mm-hmm.
department and in another department. And so we have a women, gender, and sexuality studies program,
Mm-hmm.
well, department in our college. And one of their professors wants to work with us on future research. And then we have a professor in psychology who is sort of a leader in the psychology of women in the field. And so it's really cool to work with her. Um, The additional challenges are trying to figure out where we can safely present our research. Um, so that has been a concern, which is why we have not done any poster or paper presentations yet. But I've had a couple of conversations, and I think we'll be able to present it next year at AERA.
Mhm.
We're going to gather additional data along with information about, experiences in college, whether it's like those social experiences, like how lonely do you feel? Do you feel like you're connected to your campus? As well as we're going to look at information as far as like major and their academic success and persistence. And so I think if we take that approach, it may not be as difficult to disseminate our results.
Yeah, well, um, I guess this is important work, so I guess it will be well received on different platforms.
Hopefully,
Yes, yes,
we
yes.
submitted the paper to a psychology journal that's specifically about men and masculinity, but the editor has had it for a little over, well, I think it's either right at a week or a day or two past a week because I submitted it while I was in
Mhm.
Philadelphia. So
Yes.
I'm not sure how he feels about it.
Mhm.
And so we'll
Yes,
see if it's well received or not.
yes, yes, definitely. Um, can you walk us through the process? Okay, you already described some steps, but how long did it take from beginning the conception of inception of the idea, the topic, to this point that you just submitted to a journal?
Yeah. So from November of 22 until April of 24. So with this type of project, you have to have the resources to do it because it
Hmm.
is a heavy lift. You're switching from qualitative to quantitative and possibly back. Um, and then you're waiting on collaborators to respond. You're waiting for
Hmm.
other faculty. You're waiting for these experts to give you their decisions and weigh in. So all of those things slow the project down. And every time we made a shift from one data collection phase to the next, we had to submit a modification to the IRB.
Hmm.
And we had to make sure everything we were doing was ethical. And then we had to gather data. And I say analyze, like we didn't analyze data for the quantitative piece. That was all me. And so I had to do it multiple times. And I used different analysis software to make sure my answers were right.
Hmm.
Because I wanted to again avoid the work being rejected because of undue scrutiny and undue
Yes.
criticism. And as I tell my students, if you take away every argument your detractors have, that makes your life a little easier. Um, and so I think moving forward, the work should be a lot faster. So right now, I'm going to start probably Monday analyzing the data for men of color for this same instrument. And we're
Hmm.
going to check to see if the reliability and validity hold up in these men. If it does, we don't have to redo the qualitative piece. If it does not, if there's for some reason the factor structure doesn't work, we'll go back to the data we've already gathered for those men
Hmm.
and see if those themes are not present for men of color. And if they're not, then there just might be multiple definitions of toxic masculinity that are, based in culture, which is
Hmm.
fine because that's what we kind of anticipate anyway.
Hmm.
Um, so the process is long um, and it can feel daunting, but if you have a really good support system, it should be okay.
Yes. So that takes me to the next question that
Mhm.
is related to um, what advice would you give to someone looking to use a similar research design or doing a similar study like this? Because you are speaking from a professor, a position, and then you have a structure in place. You have students that you have you have to support, you supervise, but they you have a team, and you have also a team of other colleagues, faculty that work with you, and you had access to other experts to give you feedback or validation of the instruments. But if you were talking to a student, a graduate student, a doctoral student working on one of these topics, what advice would you give to them?
So the first piece of advice is check in with your advisor or your mentor to make sure they have the capacity to support you. Um, Not all faculty have the same expertise. And so instrument development is a very niche approach to doing research. The students in my lab are just fortunate that I learned how to do it already. So I was able to give them the readings, I was able to teach them how to do it and go through the process. If they had asked one of my colleagues here, they would have told them no. Like, no, we don't do that in this lab. And so it wouldn't have worked. Um, Also, don't start a project you don't have the time to do. So if this is what a PhD student wants to work on, this needs to be your dissertation project. Like that's just it. Because this amount of work, I could do it because I am faculty. And so I can say this is, approximately 25, 30 hours a week. I'm supposed to be doing research anyway. And so I have the time to give. I would not have done this project as a doctoral student or an undergrad student without, that support because it's too much of a lift. Um, and then if you want to do a project like this as a student, I would honestly recommend just stopping after that first phase of gathering qualitative data, getting a really strong working definition for the construct, and then use that as the argument why a department should hire you.
Mhm.
Um, because it's very selfish, but it's smart. Because people who disagree with me, they have to cite my paper to talk about them disagreeing with me. People who want to do the research have to cite my paper to use the instrument. So I know that makes me look good when I get ready to apply for tenure. And so that kind of helps the department because all of these folks are citing us. That makes the department happy. And so if you want to follow this sort of avenue of research, don't give it all away before you graduate. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah,
think,
and yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yes, no, and I think I agree completely with everything you said, um, because it's not only about giving everything away, but also being reasonable about what you can actually do as a student, as a doctoral student. And then you have some resources, you've been gaining knowledge and skills, research skills, but you have also limited time and then certain level of expertise that is in development, you know?
Yeah, in money.
So
Don't forget money. We
support.
spent yeah,
What about
I've
funding?
s- I've spent I think if I had to guess, we've spent maybe 20 about $20,000 on this project, if not
Hmm.
more.
Hmm.
Um, so including person power, I know it's more than that because I pay two of the undergrad researchers who are on this project and they make a stipend of about $1,500 a month or something like that. And we've been doing it for almost 2 years. So their salary plus recruiting participants and
Hmm.
paying for software, it's a ridiculously high amount of money. And as a grad student, you don't have those kind of resources unless you're at like Vanderbilt or MIT or
Or,
Harvard or something
or
like that.
apply to certain
Or,
support
or, or apply to get a grant. Yeah. And so
grants. So that would
and
be another advice, applying for funding
yeah,
opportunity.
absolutely. If you
Mhm.
have the option to apply for funding, do so. I think for us, I did get some internal funding to work on this project, and then I used, my research funds from the department. And so the hope that we have is that once we have this validated and published, we then can apply from external funding to see if there are any health effects of endorsing these behaviors or ideas.
Mhm.
And if there are health effects, then what can we do to either perform some sort of intervention for attitude change
Mhm.
or lessen the negative impacts of having these ideologies if you're just going to hang on to them. Because again, it's not that you endorse these ideas and that's a bad thing. It's that you endorse these ideas or these behaviors so much you're hurting yourself or others. And,
Mhm.
and we when we conceptualize this, we kind of liken it to high level coping. nicknamed John Henryism, where it's fine that you use this active coping style, but it's a problem when you do it so much that your cortisol levels rise so high that it damages your heart.
Mm,
That's what the type of approach we're taking. And again, I'm fortunate, I'm privileged to have the resources and I have the support. We have a pre-awards grant person who can help us with this. We have a full-time school level research coordinator who can help us with this kind of stuff. But if you don't have that level of support, then I would hesitate to tell you to take on a project of this magnitude.
definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much for all your advice and walking us through your research.
Hmm.
Uh, this is very informative and helpful as we plan for, specifically, being a student, planning for research, for dissertation work, the magnitude of the, the work that we can take on at this level. So thank you so much for your time
No problem
and
at all.
for sharing. And well, I hope we see you soon in another opportunity to share more about our research. And thank you so much.
No problem.